Big Cass walked into WWE on day one and immediately commanded attention. He's over 7 feet tall, and you can't teach that. You physically cannot look away from that. Unlike Great Khali, the Giant Singh, or even the Big Show, Big Cass is a rare 7-footer who's also ripped to shreds. You cannot overlook a guy of that stature. Unless he spent the past few years in AEW. Subscribe in Swahili. AEW is equal parts a wrestling promotion and a graveyard for big men. And Big Cass is the headstone. Big Cass has now found a new lease on life in WWE, where I think his second chance will be more like Drew McIntyre and less like Aleister Black. Motherfuckers are pining for Big Cass to reunite with Enzo, but at 5'11", Enzo is better off signing with AEW, where he's more likely to win a world title. AEW is the little guy territory, and this is by design. It is engineered by design for small white men to get over at the highest levels of the company. Friends of the show, K100, were recently talking about yours truly, and in response to my fire takes about booking biases in pro wrestling, this one guy was all like,
"The only color I want to see at the end of the day is green, brother."
Green,
you know what
baby.
I'm saying?
Right, yeah, brother.
K100 is a friend of the show, but that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my African life. The only color I see is green is the pro wrestling version of I don't see color or all lives matter. Disco himself called out the glass ceiling in WWE. So how could a glass ceiling exist for a talent that draws, but at the same time, pro wrestling is a meritocracy where the only color a booker sees is green? Don't ever believe that horseshit. At the end of the day, every wrestling promotion you've ever known is one giant conspiracy. A conspiracy to build a company around a small number of hand-picked stars based on what the booker thinks will draw. And if anything else gets over without the booker's consent, well, go ask Zack Ryder and Damien Mizdow how that worked out for them. Every booker has a bias, and Tony Khan loves a short king. AEW is like a pro wrestling theme park with signs that say you must be this short to ride. Don't believe me? Look at the resume. No AEW World Champion has ever been taller than 6'4". No AEW World Champion has ever weighed more than 280 pounds. Samoa Joe is the exception every single AEW stat leans on to pretend that it's really not a problem. But if you pull Samoa Joe out of the math, the heaviest AEW World Champion of all time is Hangman Adam Page at 229 pounds. 229 pounds. That's not a heavyweight champion. That's a cruiserweight with a vasectomy and a gardening habit. Hangman's words and mine. Let's run the big man body count in AEW right now. Wardlow, a former TNT champion who once pinned MJF with 1 foot and got standing ovations for his powerbomb symphonies, is riding the AEW bench. In the recent years that he was healthy, he was floundering in the mid-card like a jacked-up Jack Perry. Brian Cage, Chico, California's own, one of the most athletic big men of his generation. This man recently won an IFBB bodybuilding competition, so it should come as no surprise that he's used as fodder to get smaller guys over. Cage's last singles match came on July 15th, where he lost to diminutive Darby Allin on Dynamite. Lance Archer got the Jake the Snake cosign. He had a unique entrance where he would beat up jobbers half his size on his way to the ring. In this company, I'm surprised those beatdowns weren't 50-50 brawls on his way to the ring. Ricochet would have been perfect for one of those spots, but he was too busy doing jobs in WWE. Unfortunately, AEW benched Lance Storm and Jake, and now that Lance is back, he's eye candy for the Don Callis family. Mark Davis is eye candy for the Don Callis family, and he just lost the meaningless national championship to former CMLL welterweight champion Andrade, who, full disclosure, is way more over than his push. Jake Doyle is also eye candy for the Don Callis family, and I always get it mixed up with Mark Davis, don't you? Brody King got hot earlier this year and was vaulted to the main event picture by popular demand defined by a sea of fuck ice chants. But Tony Khan is tight with the Ellisons and the Trump regime, not to mention Brody King is 6'6", 290, so that man never had a chance. If Tony Khan really was a colorblind booker and the only color he saw was green, Brody King would be getting a massive push right now. But due to those fuck ice chants, the only color Tony Khan saw was red, so Brody got buried. Whether it was Big Bill, Bobby Lashley, or even Keith Lee, I could go on and on and on. Not one of them has ever had a real shot at touching a main event scene that's been fully colonized by undersized New Japan and PWG All-Stars. And it's not like the big guys aren't trying. Lashley and the Hurt Syndicate was the most overstable in the company until MVP committed the sin of insulting Dave Meltzer, who's like the Patroclus to Tony Khan's Achilles. Google that reference. Powerhouse Hobbs was a former TNT and Trios champion before being stifled in that exact same holding pattern. So he left. He didn't get phased out. He saw the 5-foot notches written on the wall, and he walked. Meanwhile, there's Darby Allin, Kenny Omega, MJF, and Will Ospreay. Junior heavyweights, every one of them. That's not the supporting cast. That's the class of the promotion. And I'm not even saying all of this is a bad thing. Again, every booker has a bias. And all these little niggas keep beating up the big guys because in AEW, David is Goliath. There's a narrative that AEW is more open-minded about who they crown. Look at how progressive they are. Shorter guys can be world champion here. That's the pitch, right? Wrong. That's not open-mindedness. That's the ceiling. AEW only books smaller guys at the top of the card. It's not that size doesn't matter to them. Size does matter, but big men get the short end of the stick. They're structurally excluded from ever getting to the top. Diversity of champions, my big black dick. That's a glass ceiling, and AEW's glass ceiling is the same height as a doghouse. If you're a big man in AEW, you've got exactly two options. Get comfortable doing jobs to cruiserweights half your size, or run for your 11-foot life. Powerhouse Hobbs picked door number 2. And not only did he compete on the winning side of a SummerSlam match inside a stadium, he just main evented Raw as part of its top storyline. Smart man. This is why Big Cass matters to the whole argument. He had a top-of-the-card presence the moment he walked through the curtain on day 1. 7 feet of you cannot ignore this. Yet despite being in the best physical and mental shape of his life, AEW made him disappear. Not because he got worse, because the room he walked into was never built to hold him. Ric Flair once said, to be the man, you gotta beat the man. In AEW, the man is typically 5'8" and 205 pounds, and nobody big enough to actually beat him is ever getting the chance to try. If you like little white men all over the main event, AEW is the company for you. Big men have it worse than women in this territory, and almost nobody is mistreated more than women in AEW. AEW has this belief that women can't draw. That's why they never main event any of their pay-per-views. On the July 15th Dynamite, Tony Khan booked a women's trios match to start after an overrun, where it was designed to fail as a main event just to prove his point. Instead, Mercedes Moné, Willow Nightingale and them drew AEW's biggest rating in 2 years. Dynamite's viewership has slipped in each of the past 2 weeks since, with men in the main event. If Tony Khan doesn't want to book big men in his main events, fine. But Mercedes and Willow should be main eventing All In, because this masturbatory Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega dream match is selling less tickets than Virgil at a meet and greet. WWE has this saying about how they want their top stars to be able to pass an airport test. In other words, they want their biggest stars to stand out among the sea of normies at an airport, usually due to their size or look. This is not a bulletproof way of booking main eventers. It's just a gauge that isn't always right. Some of the most popular WWE superstars would fail the airport test, like Daniel Bryan or even a skinny fat CM Punk. But at the same time, some of WWE's biggest stars of all time passed that same test with flying colors. In AEW, no world champion in history has ever passed the goddamn airport test. That's just as much of a booking flaw as it is to expect everybody to pass that test. By only crowning world champions more ordinary than a Ricochet promo, you're doing a disservice to somebody who could be a larger-than-life representation of a number 2 company desperate for mainstream clout. Ricochet is a little guy who left WWE's big man territory, and he still couldn't get over in the AEW main event. For more on how Twitter Ricky fumbled his own career, check out this video.